Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa says he will, within 4 months, present a full implementation plan to Parliament to evaluate the steps to be taken following receipt of the completed state capture report. Now, having failed to hold the executive and top management of state organs to account over the years, a question arises on whether Parliament will effectively apply itself to the task. In 2021, former Parliament's chair of the Transport Committee, Dikeledi Magadze, told the Commission into allegations of state capture that the ANC received an instruction not to support the DA's motion to investigate the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa, PRASA, as you heard, and damning statements against PRASA in this report. I mean, in its findings, the Commission has recommended that a brand new probe be instituted to get to the bottom of why the state-run Passenger Rail Agency was allowed to slide into almost total ruin and who should be held responsible. Well, in studio with us, political analyst Mpumelelo Mkhabela is in with us in studio to talk about this. It's good to have you. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Leon.
All right. So 4 months. That's what the president has told us, we hope. You know, with always delays and extensions, those are kind of things we're used to now. But having failed on many occasions on oversight committees and roles, does Parliament have the same capacity to ensure that this is implemented and that action is finally taken?
Oh, well, Leon, I mean, Parliament's record, as you correctly point out, doesn't inspire confidence, first of all. But secondly, that the fact that the president is saying that it's going to take 4 months to put together an implementation plan, remember, it's a plan. He's not saying that after 4 months he's going to start acting on the recommendations of the Zondo Commission report. He's saying in 4 months he's going to present a plan to Parliament. So the expectation is that then Parliament must then come up with its own recommendations on how it will process the recommendations of the Zondo report. So this lengthy process that the president is instituting now, it's quite concerning because it doesn't seem to be showing a sense of agency. People want results. People want action. Already the Zondo Commission had been delayed because of the voluminous work that he had to go through. He had requested so many extensions, and it was granted by the court up until this week when he finalized his report. So the fact that the president is delaying, well, it might give Parliament or parliamentarians some time to think about how they will actually engage with the president's plan. But to be honest, based on the record of Parliament of failing to hold the executive to account, of actually being sycophantic towards the executive and the president during the Zuma time, but actually, by the way, it didn't start during the Zuma time. Even during Mbeki's time, the Parliament was always sycophantic towards the executive. Yeah. But the danger of that sycophancy was only exposed when we had a terrible president under Zuma who was captured by the Guptas. That's when you actually realize that how dangerous it is for the entire Parliament, especially ANC MPs, to be always kowtowing to the executive, always taking instructions from Luthuli House via its caucus, instead of dealing with issues independently and representing the people as the Constitution says they should.
It's very hard to think that this is where we're at, that the reality is that the ANC is implicated. They are implicated as being complacent in this report. When it was reached to the levels of Parliament, it was brushed aside. They were protecting each other. This was ensured that nobody was accountable from the ANC for anything that was done within these allegations of state capture. Now, this report is being handed over to the ANC, and they need to act against themselves. You explain this to me. How is that going to happen?
Well, that's the difficulty of this situation we find ourselves in now, because the ANC is a majority party in Parliament. The ANC is the governing party by virtue of being a majority party in Parliament, and the ANC, by virtue of its majority party in Parliament, is able to elect the president. In this case, they elected President Ramaphosa, who was the presidential candidate in the previous election. And the ANC remains a dominant party in the legislature, and it dominates the parliamentary committees. So whatever committee that you can think about that should perhaps be established to deal with this report, it's more likely to be formed in terms of the proportionality principle. So the majority party will always have more MPs in that committee. So that's why now there's a proposal from among parties like Bantu Holomisa of the UDM to say perhaps the ANC must step aside in terms of dealing with this report in Parliament, because the ANC is implicated, as you correctly point out. But there's another way of looking at it, that perhaps the members of Parliament in the ANC that are implicated in the report should be the ones who step aside. I can imagine, for example, someone like Musebenzi Zwane, who's heavily implicated in fact, there's a recommendation that they should be charged or prosecuted. People like Faith Mutambe, who did horrible things in this building here at the SABC, with the former CEO, Hlawudu Motsweneng. People like that who are still MPs, they chair committees. How could they participate in a process of processing this report and you still expect the outcome to be credible? So the whole situation doesn't inspire confidence. And are they the right people to really consider the president's plan to implement the report? It raises questions. And there are so many critical recommendations in that report, if you look. Some of them have got to do with redesigning our democracy. There's a proposal for Parliament to consider electoral reforms, for example. There's another proposal to amend the SARS Act so that the head of SARS should be competitively appointed. So there should be it should not be the prerogative of the president. There are other recommendations about putting together a law that will make it criminal for public office bearers to abuse power, which is basically beyond the type of corruption, normal corruption that we experience daily. So all of those things will require Parliament to process. But how do you expect the people that they themselves abuse power to be the ones who pass such legislation? So Parliament is completely conflicted from that point of view.
Yeah. What about the president? I need to ask this because the president hasn't come out of the state capture report smelling of roses either. I mean, he has had serious allegations put against him of saying that you were deputy president at this time. Don't tell me you didn't know what was going on. Don't tell me that you, in a way, were complicit to exactly what was going on. You were in the party. You are the party. And besides that, there was the whole issue of the PRASA funding. So he is also a key role player in this, and he needs to make a decision about himself. Help me understand this. Is this not all just... And who's going to step aside and say, well, you know what, you handle this, and we'll wait to say what your findings are, and we'll decide it from there. I mean, how can you not be subjective?
Look, Leon, one of the reasons why in the beginning we had to have a judge investigating and presiding over public hearings over these state capture allegations and now having a report in front of the nation was precisely because the politicians could not investigate themselves. But now the question is, can they now implement themselves the recommendations coming from the judge, which is the question you're asking? And the president himself is not clean in this matter. So look, I watched him when he was making his submission to the Zondo Commission. And it was clear to me that what he was trying to do was basically, he was pushing this unity objective, trying to unite the ANC, trying to not to rubbish the other faction in the ANC that he was fighting against. So he was trying to say, listen, yeah, well, we have people that were wrongly appointed in government, but, it's not like they're useless. I'm quoting him verbatim. He said, it's not like they're useless. Some of them can be trained, we can work with them. And then Zondo was saying, look, but, there's these things that happened and when you were there. Couldn't you have done something? He asked him directly. Yeah. And then he said, look, I had to, bide my time because, some people were fired for raising issues, and they were even laughing at the commission when he said, look, some people were fired, as if he was afraid that he could be fired. Of course, there was no way he could have been fired because he was deputy president of the ANC. He had that strength. So the Zuma could not fire him from cabinet on that basis. So he comes across as somebody who was cowardly, who was not strong enough to be able to take action. But it didn't end there, Leanne. Once he was now president, now he had all the power, right, to fire and hire himself. What did he do? He then appointed the very same people that were implicated in previous state capture reports. Again, as I said, he was trying to push the unity mission, trying to get everyone on board. But unfortunately, all the people he was trying to unite with in the ANC were not interested in that unity. Yeah. They continued to fight him. Up until today, they continue to fight him. And the fight is not going to end. No, it's not going to end. And it's just going to make his role a lot more difficult because we know that he wants to be appointed into a second term
as ANC president come December. This is a very important moment for him. And he has got this sitting on his shoulders, that the country is looking to him and saying, look, we're seeing through you. Firstly, you've got a whole issue of a Phala farm that we need to hear about, because I find it amazing. It doesn't matter what we're talking about. South Africans bring it right back to Phala farm. We can have any conversation, even monkeypox, and it comes back to Phala.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, because South Africans are now thinking, hang on a second, we need answers. We're not stupid. We cannot. These are serious allegations that have been laid against the president. And then this commission comes out with findings saying that, you know, what we'd suspected all along.
Yeah.
When you were inside the party, you were deputy president, and coming and saying, well, I wasn't sure. I didn't know that this was really happening, and I only saw and read about it in the media, and I thought I'd stay inside so I can try and help. He did nothing to try and help inside the party. So whether he was in or out, I don't know if it would have made a difference. What is he going to do? How is he going to implement this now, the findings?
Look, I think one of the reasons why he's giving himself 4 months is because he probably will try again. Again with this unity mission that he's pursuing, which has failed already. But he's going to try to take this report to the ANC National Working Committee, maybe ultimately the National Executive Committee of the ANC, where he's going to try to get everyone to have a buy-in in the report. And I can tell you now, he's not going to win there. He has already committed that he's not going to question Zondo's criticism against him. He said that even before he read the report. And then he committed to implement Zondo's recommendations, right? But he will fail to convince other senior ANC leaders implicated in the report not to take that report on review. They will definitely take that report on review, regardless of whether there are merits to their complaints, because the main issue is to suspend any action against them. You know what that does? It buys them time. When it buys them time, they remain active in the ANC. When they remain active in the ANC, there remains a scope for them to rise again, because the ANC is always a vehicle for them to get into positions, to get into tenders, to get into all kinds of malfeasance that we've seen in this report. So they will try to protect their position in the ANC as a vehicle for self-enrichment. So the only way they can do that is take a report on review, make it difficult to implement it. They will go to the Integrity Commission of the ANC and say, no, look, we've taken the report on review. The Integrity Commission must wait. Or we should be allowed to continue to participate in ANC leadership positions or conferences and that type of stuff. That will bring the ANC into paralysis. I'll tell you what might work, which is a very radical position, but the ANC will not agree to it. If Ramaphosa puts in his plan of action one recommendation that says this parliament must dissolve itself. As a president, I'm recommending that parliament must dissolve itself, and then we must go on an election. But before we go on an election, let's have the following principles adopted by all parties. These are the kinds of MPs that we should have as a matter of rule. To be a member of parliament, you don't have to have any allegations of corruption against you, not at least in the Zondo report. Number two, you have to have tax clearance. You can't be a member of parliament, you don't pay tax. There's no evidence that you pay tax. Number three, there must be a certain minimum level of qualification or criteria to be the president of the country. I always say the constitution is conflicted in a sense that it requires a lot from the president. There's too much that the president is required to do. And if you look at the Nkandla judgment, for example, the list of things the president is doing and the sacrifices in terms of personal time, family time. I mean, Mogoeng even says the president must endure graciously the role he has to play because of the voluminous work that you have to do. But alongside that, it's absent what is required to do this kind of work. What kind of a character is required to do this kind of work? So the qualification to be the president in South Africa is the same as being a member of parliament.
Yeah.
I always say, in terms of the constitution now, strictly speaking, Mosebenzi Zwane qualifies perfectly to be the president of South Africa. Faith Mutambi qualifies perfectly. Tina Jumat Peterson qualifies perfectly. Suprama Mpumelelo qualifies perfectly to be the president of South Africa. How? Because the constitution says that.
Yeah.
So we have to differentiate and say, to be the president of South Africa, you have to have the following credentials, and those credentials can't be the same as an ordinary member of parliament. And similarly, to be a minister, you have this kind of, you need this type of character. And then you subject those kind of people who pre-qualifies to a majority decision. So the population decides on people that are already having a set of minimum level of credentials. At the moment, any person can just rock up, you mobilize in parliament, you mobilize in society, you become president, and you can drag the country down.
Yeah.
So we have to fix that.
We do, but it sounds like what you're talking about is almost like a pie in the sky. It's like me saying, I want to own my own private island, and I want an aeroplane, and I want my chef, and I want this, and I want that, and that's the ideal world. That's never going to happen. You think the ANC is going to just hand over power, dissolve parliament, and say, okay, let's start again from fresh, and everybody's got to have a clean record, and you don't think they're going to protect each other and protect themselves, because the reality is that a lot of them belong in jail. That is the long and short of it. I mean, I don't know how much more money needs to be spent on commissions and state capture reports and hearing evidence, seeing evidence, looking around us and realizing that things have gone terribly wrong with so many of the institutions that we've got under the leadership of the ANC. They've been implicated in this State Capture Commission report that has said that this is the problem, that the country under the ANC has unfortunately failed. They're never going to hand over power. I mean, that's not going to happen. There's catered deployment and protectionism at another level.
Look, it's true that, I mean, they're not going to hand over power just like that. But it doesn't mean that we, as a society, must not be, idealistic about what we want of our country. We simply can't subject, ourselves to the wishes of the ANC, which we know has been captured and has been corrupted. By the way, I think the ANC was lucky not to have a recommendation that says it should be criminally charged. Because if you look at the Part 5 of Zondo's report and you look at the Bosasa section, you can see that it has been established that the ANC itself was a recipient of corrupt money, both on Bosasa and also on the asbestos case in the Free State. But somehow, Zondo went around and said, well, the individuals that were involved in facilitating the donation for the ANC should be investigated. So he avoided saying the ANC as an organization should be investigated and be prosecuted. So it has already escaped from that perspective. However, it doesn't mean that we as society must not dream of a possibility that we could one day be led by clean people, by people who are ethical, of high ethical standards. We can be led by a president who is ethical, upright, who is determined, who's decisive, who's selfless about not only about his time, but also in terms of using the resources of the republic efficiently. All of those things, it's not actually, by the way, a dream. All of those things are in the Constitution.
Indeed they are.
So the question is, how can we live according to the Constitution? So I've spent a lot of time trying to think about this, and I even wrote a book which is coming up next month about how the ANC failed to deal with these corruption issues. And if you analyze in detail, some of it is really about the ANC having failed to produce what I call the power of example in leadership, because people learn more by example as they do by being whipped when they get out of line. So if you give people the power of example and you say, listen, we as the leaders of the ANC or leaders of the country in parliament, everywhere, we lead by example, then people tend to follow that. So the consequences of the ANC being corrupted or being captured in the government has huge ramifications, because the entire country now, ordinary citizens now believe they can get corrupt and get away with it.
Absolutely. One final question, and please keep it very short, because it's already 2 minutes past 8. One of the recommendations out of the report as well is that we, as South Africans, elect our president. Do you think that this perhaps is a new lease on the electoral system? I mean, that is in a way the ideal, is that we will have a say in who our president can be. I mean, the list of names that you gave me a bit earlier, and you're saying that they could be the president of South Africa the way things are right now. If we change that, and if that is indeed the way it is, would that help us?
Well, I think Zondo makes that recommendation, but it's a partial solution. So if you don't combine it with a set of pre-qualification, it's going to fail, because we can have, remember, Adolf Hitler was elected by Germans, in a democratic election. You have a situation where Donald Trump and other people that become dictators they come via a democratic process. So if you're going to open up like that without a set of pre-qualifications, you can have characters whose intentions is basically to capture the state, just like we have seen it happen now. So I still believe in the pre-qualification, and then you can open.
It's happened already, and we don't have that system.
Yeah.
So perhaps our system isn't working, and we need to rethink the whole situation.
We have to.
Thanks for the long and short of it. We've got to bring you back in. I cannot believe the time. I honestly can't. Thanks for talking to us. Thanks so much. Giving us a little bit of analysis there from the State Capture report, the political analyst Mpumelelo Mkhabela, and just his views on whether South African Parliament has shown effectiveness in its role to hold those in government positions accountable. Wow, I don't know, very difficult, but there's a lot to get through when we still talk about